Facts about slavery that you weren't taught in school. Many times in human history, the slave master has been brown and the slaves have been white. Over 1 million Christian Europeans were enslaved by the Islamic Barbary states of North Africa between the 16th and 19th centuries. A particularly valuable type of slave was pale-skinned Christian women. They were highly sought after by Muslim men and often fetched a high price at slave markets. The famous author Miguel de Cervantes, the writer of the character Don Quixote, he himself was captured from a ship and taken to Algiers. He was a slave for 5 years before a ransom was eventually paid. Christian slave boys filled the ranks of the Ottoman Empire's elite soldiers, the Janissaries, in a system called devshirme, or blood tax. Christian boys as young as 7 were taken from their parents into slavery. Once captured, the boys were dressed in red to prevent escape. They were forcibly converted to Islam and given an Islamicized name. Christian populations of the Balkans, such as Serbians, Bulgarians and Greeks, were the main source of slaves. Parents went to great lengths to prevent their child's capture, such as marrying them very young or hiding them away from soldiers. The purpose of these slave soldiers was to create a corps of troops firmly loyal to the Sultan. However, not all the slaves became soldiers. Some became bureaucrats or were turned into eunuchs. Occasionally, a slave could achieve a high rank, such as the case of Ibrahim Pasha. However, the practice was largely devastating. A Hungarian adventurer described the pain and sorrow of parents whose children no longer recognized them or their families because they'd become so alienated. And the Bishop of Thessalonica described how Christian boys were forced to fight their own people. The United States' first war as an independent country was launched to free Americans who were being held as slaves in Africa. In 1801, President Thomas Jefferson launched the First Barbary War. Jefferson had long wanted to use military force against the Barbary pirates who were enslaving American sailors. Jefferson ordered the Navy and the Marine Corps to blockade the port of Tripoli and convince its ruler to hand over the American slaves and hostages. This was met with mixed success. Notable incidents such as the burning of the USS Philadelphia took place by American sailors to prevent it falling to enemy hands. Through a combination of military force and diplomacy, the hostages and slaves were eventually released. The war established the Marine Corps as an integral part of the American military, a legacy of which lasts to this day, as the words "Shores of Tripoli" are in the Marines' hymn, a reference to the Barbary Wars. Barbary pirates attacked American ships and enslaved their crews. This led 2 future presidents, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, to go to London to speak to the ambassador of Tripoli, Abdul Rahman Adjah. Jefferson asked him, "Why do you make war on nations who have done you no harm? We consider all of mankind our friends who have done us no wrong." The ambassador replied that it was written in the Quran that all nations who did not acknowledge the Prophet Muhammad's authorities were sinners, and that it was the duty of every Muslim to make war upon them and enslave all those they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim who was slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. Jefferson became determined to use force, and in 1801, when president, he launched the First Barbary War to free American slaves. Whilst much is known about slavery in the Americas, little is known about the African kingdoms who enslaved other Africans and grew rich in the process. It has been said the Europeans were junior partners to the Africans, as military weakness and disease made them entirely reliant on native kingdoms. Empires such as the Ashanti Empire and the Kingdom of Dahomey became enormously wealthy and powerful from their selling of slaves. Whilst the African role is largely ignored in the West, it has been addressed by modern Africans. In 1999, the president of Benin, when speaking to an all-black church in Baltimore, fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness for his country's role in slavery. Dahomey's major role in slavery was only ended in 1852 when Britain forced an anti-slavery treaty on them. The Ashanti Empire resisted attempts to abolish slavery, and it wasn't until British colonisation that the practice stopped completely.